Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Filipino American Women Project. I'm going to keep these announcements brief because I actually start incorporating my announcements while I interview our guests live. So real briefly, if you love our show, do us a favor, will you? Please leave a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. If you are an Apple Podcast listener, or iTunes, depending on your generation as to when you started listening to podcasting, you can simply visit our show in the app, scroll to the very bottom, and down there you can actually leave a 5-star written review. If you are not on Apple Podcasts, then consider going on Podchaser. You can visit our website, TFAWproject.com, and in the top right, you'll see Podchaser right there with our social media links. And we would love to hear from you and have you share to the world why you love this show so much. And my second and final announcement, you're welcome, is exciting. First of all, have you ever considered starting a podcast, or you want to continue growing your podcast? More importantly, have you ever participated in attempting a world record? Well, PodFest Global Summit is attempting a Guinness World Records title for the largest attendance for a virtual podcasting conference in 1 week. And guess what? At the time of this announcement, we have reached our goal of attendees. So at this point, if you want to tell your friends, I was part of a Guinness World Records title during the pandemic, sign up. It's free. And the conference is still going on today, right now, and tomorrow, August 14th and August 15th. In fact, you can catch me speaking on August 15th, and you will know the time, depending on your time zone, when you register for your free ticket by checking out the show notes of this episode or visiting TFAWproject.com. Would love to see you there. Would love for you to connect. I actually created a group for other Filipino podcasters, so you could be a part of that. And don't wait, like I said, there's only 2 days left. Get that free education and brag to your friends that you're a part of attempting a world record. Also, I do have one discount code left for anyone that is interested in upgrading their ticket. This is especially important for anyone who attends now, but they want to have access to the past workshops that have been going on this entire week. So if you want access to all of those workshops that you missed earlier on this week, find my contact info at tfawproject.com, and I'll be happy to hook you up with my final discount code. All right, that's all the announcements I have for today. Please enjoy this next interview with powerhouse Rebecca Maria Goldschmidt. Alrighty. Okay, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Filipino American Women Project, also known as the TFAW Project for short. We have a brand spanking new website. I know I've kind of grilled on this on a couple episodes already, but you can learn more about us and our show notes and our guests on our website, tfawproject.com. That's TFAWproject.com. And before I get into any other announcements, I have to bring on my co-host, Nani Dominguez. Nani, welcome back to the show.
Hey, everyone.
Yes, and we're stoked, as I said, because every time we do an interview, we get to interview another incredible person in our community. But as I continue to tease you, let me get into a couple more announcements and housekeeping here. TFAW Project now has a phone number, if we haven't mentioned this already. So if you want to leave us a voice message, if you want to text us, Nani is usually the first to receive it, just like how she has done an incredible job managing our Instagram community. If you want to get that number, save it on your phone right now, or check the show notes because it's going to be there as well at tfawproject.com. Okay, so our number here is 415-484-TFA. Also, that is 8329. And if you saved the wrong number in the last episode, let me say this again, 415-484-8329. So that's our phone number now. You can leave a voice message. We might play it live depending on how it sounds and if it's relevant to our community. But you could just text us as well. I'd like to believe we're pretty responsive on there since we got a phone number. So also I want to share that we are starting to do video for this next season. And if you want to learn more on how to get access to our video interviews, please sign up for a newsletter, which you can also find in the show notes or on our website, tfawproject.com. Let's go ahead and introduce the guest that we are honored to have today. We have Rebecca Maria Goldschmidt. So Rebecca is an artist, educator, community organizer, and lifelong learner. She currently lives in Honolulu, Hawaii, which is also pronounced for all of you living in Honolulu, Hawaii. It's Honolulu, Hawaii. So with that said, from Honolulu, Hawaii, we got Rebecca Maria Goldschmidt. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, you guys. I'm super stoked to be here. That was a great intro.
Yes, thank you. I worked very hard on that, as you know.
Great job, Jen.
Thank you, Nani. Like before we start recording, one thing I had to mention to our listeners, if you haven't been on yet, which I encourage you to join us and share your story, is I always make it a point to ask people how they want their name to be pronounced and anything else. Like, I don't speak Tagalog, unfortunately. That's not something that I maintained since I was a kid. And so sometimes I have to make some references with things I can't pronounce very well. And so I just appreciate my guests who take that time a couple minutes before we start recording to help me pronounce things, because that way I save Nani the embarrassment. So she's the one that looks good. And then I'm the one that you all can laugh at. So
I know a couple episodes ago, you were like, Nani, you're going to start doing the intros. And I was like, we'll sit on that one.
Yeah. So we'll give that a minute. But, whenever you're ready, obviously the opportunity is there. Until then, I'm more than happy to take the bullet for us. Well, with that said, Rebecca, why don't we share, how did you hear about the TFAW Project? And more importantly, what compelled you to join us on our show today and have a conversation with us?
Wow. I feel like I've heard of you guys for a long time. And I think probably the first interview that I was aware of was with my friend who's also in the Bay and who's an amazing artist and movement practitioner, who is Same.
Yes.
I love Same. I just got to shout out my girl because she's just such a fabulous teacher. I've learned so much from her. And I think especially in quarantine, these quarantine days, like she had a like a Friday booty workshop that we were just like really getting grooving like throughout
Love it.
quarantine. And it seriously, like it was community. It was like we worked through a lot of stuff in that space. And like we met through the Babaylan Studies retreat that was like, or a conference that I think happened last year near Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I had heard of your guys' show from before that. And then somebody was like, oh, I have an episode on that show. So anyways, that's how I heard about you guys. But I love podcasts. I love radio. I love listening to people share their stories. I listen a lot to different, really random different shows. I listen to Rev Left Radio. I listen to like On Being, NPR stuff. But I just really appreciated the space that was so tailored to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there really isn't anything else like this. And I think especially for women, it's just so important to hear everyone else's stories, to see how you relate or how you don't, and what the overlap is. And there's so many unique individual experiences. And I just felt like, when you guys sent me a message, I was like, oh, of course, I'm happy to be on that. I'm happy to just chit chat with y'all and just, see what we can talk about, because there are so many topics to be covered in our experiences that just don't get the platform. So I just appreciate any kind of platform to talk about my work and hear about other people's experiences too.
Yeah, for sure. And with that, I have to thank Nani for doing the outreach, because she's the one that's really been managing our social media, mainly Instagram. And, every now and then I'm like, hey, Nani, can you reach out to this person? So Nani, thank you so much for your efforts to get people on the show, because obviously this wouldn't be possible if you didn't do that.
Of course, my pleasure. I love to connect with people and invite them on the show. It's always really fun. And I think actually, Rebecca, a few people, if I'm remembering correctly, Same is probably the first person that had referred you to us, but I think there were also a couple other ones. So very excited to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. This is really special. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I love that, because I get to find out live, like how incredible you are, Rebecca. So this is going to be great.
Oh yeah. The feeling is mutual. Glow, just the glow.
Cool. Yes. Okay. Well, Rebecca, as you know, the way that we define Filipino American women as of right now, and that continues to expand, just so you know, like the more that I learn about the people in our community, the more that I kind of want to redefine how we quote unquote qualify people for the show. So in the meantime, we identify Filipino American women as individuals who live or have lived in America that are of Filipino descent and identify as female or pronouns she, her. We have also invited the non-binary narrative as well. And even recently, Nani and I had talked to actually a Chinese Filipino in which her parents worked and lived in the Philippines, and she speaks Tagalog, obviously way better than me because I don't speak it at all. And so it's really interesting. And she struggles with if she should identify as Pinay or not, because she is of Chinese descent. And so I've been thinking about that and thinking about how do I redefine, how we identify Filipino American women to be more inclusive and include stories like her, because we can't deny the fact that she is Pinay in her own way, So until then, Rebecca, why don't you share with us a little bit about your family background and why you identify as Filipino American woman?
I guess I am every woman, right?
Yes. like the Whitney Houston song.
Exactly. I won't bust out the song right now, but I'm so glad that you guys talk about that too, especially like from the queer lens and thinking about just like expanding what Filipino-ness is besides like outside of national boundaries, because I think that is something that is important for us to keep talking about. Like if you grow up in Filipino community anywhere, like I think you can claim some kind of Filipino-ness, right? And then I think, especially with this person who has more Chinese ancestry, I think right now, like everyone's really going through, and we've been doing this for a while now, right? Everyone's going through like the identity piece of like, how do we identify even a girlfriend of mine just texted me the other day. She was like, how do you identify again? Because I reposted that post that just came up about the history of all the different sort of social hierarchy that existed in Spanish.
The caste system.
Times, the caste system. Yeah. Which is like, for a lot of people, it's like, damn, okay. Like Filipino wasn't even the word that, we use for ourselves. I mean, we reclaimed that during the revolution, right? But all of the mestiza de sangre, mestiza de blah, 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 all the mixed different negritos, all those different words that were utilized to categorize us. So for me, like, I always just kind of growing up, because I grew up in a Jewish household. So my dad's German Jewish. He was born in Israel, Palestine. And my mom is Filipino American. She was born in Chicago and her parents are from Pangasinan. Wow. So I have a really very unique experience as, growing up Jewish and Filipino. And I know there's a lot of us out there, but we're all kind of like finding each other right now. Like I've had some really great combos and connects with other Filipino Jews in the past year, really. And so, I think growing up, I never really identified as Filipino. I knew that we were Filipino, but I never like said I'm Filipino, right, or anything like that. I think it wasn't really till college that I started thinking. I mean, I had like a Filipino boyfriend in high school and it was like, oh, okay. But his family seemed so different than mine because his parents were from the Philippines. And like we related on some levels, but I think it was more like we were into music, we were into different stuff, whatever. But I didn't really feel like, oh my God, this person's Filipino. Oh, like it was just a different sense of identity, I think then. And so when I spent a couple of years living in Mexico and when I was in Mexico, I was really like, whoa, like I feel really comfortable here. What's up with that? Like, why do I connect so much with this culture and the lifestyle and the food and everything, and just like the way of being felt like way more comfortable to me. And then when I was thinking about going to grad school is when I was really like, wow, I need to like study the Philippines. Like what the hell? I got really a lot closer to my aunties who were or my family who's in San Diego. Filipino family who I had not been very much in touch with. It was like my mom's cousins. And when I started hanging out with them, I was like, oh, wow, like, yeah, I really need to study more about like, what does it mean to be Filipino and what does that look like? So when I started to look at school in Hawaii, my main goal was to come here to think about like, what does it mean to be Filipino in a place where it's like prevalent to be Filipino, whether it's like a mostly brown place, and like, how does your identity or how do you grow up? How do you relate to other people and to yourself in a place where you're not a minority? Because growing up for me, it was always like, oh, you're so exotic. Where are you from? All that kind of BS. And even through college and then especially in Mexico, like, why are you here? What, who are you? What are you? And so being Filipino really is something for me that like through my life has existed, but only really recently have I like grabbed on and been like, no, like this is mine. And I can claim this, right? But that also relates to I think here in Hawaii, I've been studying Ilocano, our language, like my family's language. And that whole process has also really made me question just the idea of like Filipino-ness in general, and learning the history of our place and our islands, and really trying to deconstruct a little bit like the actual national narrative of Filipino-ness, and how that's also a construction and a fake construction, like the same as like American, you know, it's like, what does it mean to be American? Okay, you can be like all these different things and still be under the container of American, right? But kind of trying to push the boundary a little bit more of like even how we talk about ourselves. So when my friend texted me the other day, so what do you identify as? I was like, well, when I talk to these people, I say Filipino American, because that's like, you know, like they can understand that. But when I talk to Filipinos, I'll probably say I'm Ilocano, but we're from Pangasinan, you know. But then when I talk to like my family or something like that, I'm just like, oh, like I'm Jewish, you know. So like it's just, there's so many levels. And I think that's one of the great questions that we have as a place that's been colonized so many different times. I think people forget that there is so much complexity there. And that's the amazing beauty of being, you know, like Filipino American podcast, like you could literally have anyone in there, as long as someone ties back somewhere to the Philippines. Like, I mean, you have people who are like 1/16 Filipino, you know, and maybe they feel they grew up with that person, their grandmother, whoever, their great grandparents, and they feel super connected to that. And that's totally legit too. Like, yeah,
that was kind of my answer as well when Janina had asked us that question, Jen, about she asked us who can claim Pinay, you know, because there's always so much back and forth, like, oh, you're not Filipino enough if you don't speak the language, or, you know, if you didn't grow up in these certain spaces. But I definitely agree with you. Like for me, it's definitely my grandparents that had the biggest impact. I'm close with all of, you know, everyone on my dad's side of the family, but my grandparents really instilled that in me. And I think that that's where my drive to connect with the culture outside of the context of my own family comes from. You know, the fact that they're gone now, and now that I'm interested in exploring my identity and what it means to be Filipina, I can't ask them because they're not here anymore. Like you said, in, you know, reasons why you wanted to move to Hawaii, and to grow up in a place, or to be in community in a place where you're not the minority. I think that that's what we try to do here with our community online, is provide that same kind of, you know, like comfy landing spot for folks to relate to and to be represented.
This is why I love asking this question, like every time. I just feel like it never gets old to ask this question, like, why do you identify? Because, you know, just like what you shared, Rebecca, it's just, we're all so different, diverse, multifaceted. And I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to like, do you identify, you know, as Pinay? Do you identify as Filipino? You know, because otherwise, anyone else you try to answer that to is just, you're just not going to feel good enough in some capacity, or you're going to feel like you need to like prove yourself or what have you. And so it's an ongoing conversation. And I think that even once you define it, it's constantly evolving, like that definition, especially as you start to learn more about yourself. Like, for example, you know, this year, my sister, actually since early last year, my sister has had this desire to learn about our dad's story, because we had lost my dad when my sister was only 5. And she's like in her late 20s now. She's close to Nani's age. I won't say the age because I just not, why not? My sister listens to these shows, by the way. So yeah, so my sister's listening. Hi, Josephine, I love you. Like, she listens to our shows and she talks to me sometimes. But anyway, you know, it's really recently that she had a desire to learn about our dad's story. And for a long time, I thought that my parents were immigrants from the Philippines. I thought that both my mom and dad were strictly from the Philippines. Well, what I've come to find recently is that my grandpa, my dad's dad, was a Filipino American. And he actually worked in California helping out, like he was in the farming industry. I don't know the entire story. I'm still learning it as I go. But he had encouraged my dad to join the military because he knew that, like, I understand now why he said, oh, there's better opportunities in America. I thought he was just saying that when really, like, he was in America and he knew for certain that there were more opportunities for him. And so now I'm thinking, like, okay, am I like a first generation Fil-Am or a second? Like, I don't, 1.5, I don't know what I am, but it's really cool that I feel like, you know, our identity is ever evolving and we're constantly learning about ourselves. So I don't really think that defining our identity is definite. It's more about who are we today and why do we identify as such today, which is why I try to be like, why I strive to have these conversations be so much about the present, because I think that's what's most important today and nowadays and probably forever, in my opinion. So anyway, that's that.
I appreciate the like present moment thing. I had someone say to me once, like kind of in a conversation with a couple other people, they said to someone else, "Oh, you're Filipino, right?" And this was coming from a professor of mine. So they were saying to another person, "Oh, you're Filipino, right?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm half." And he was like, "Oh, well, you should talk to Rebecca about that because, quote, she's still trying to figure that out." Yes.
Interesting comment.
And I was like so horrified that someone would say that to me. That was like in the beginning of my grad school years. And I was like, whoa, okay. So like clearly you don't understand anything about Filipino identity because like literally everybody is still trying to figure that out. It's like a continual process of just
We're all learning together what it means.
Yeah. And I think I was just like, I was very offended and I like just kind of like taken aback by what that was. And I think from that moment, and there were a lot of interactions that happened like that throughout my career, but that sort of like just doubt and sort of like weird, just sort of passive aggressive kind of like thinking about what this whole process is to me was like, it just made me feel even more rooted in like the work that needs to be done to like tease it all out.
Yeah.
And I don't think it has to be like, I'm not dying over it. You know what I'm saying? Like this is like a richness, like you're saying, like discovering your family's history, discovering like what parts of you relate, what doesn't, what you take with you, what you don't, like that constant change, like all of the things that you're adapting to what comes out. I mean, it's like, I don't eat balut, but that doesn't mean I'm like
not Filipina. Yeah.
Like, and like you guys said, like there's no definite moment where you're like in or out. It's just a constant flow. And I think in the same way, like gender, people who are like working with gender identity and like presenting in one way or not, or the other day you're going to be like this, or, you know, it's like identity in general is just consistently changing. And that to me is much more, I guess the dynamics of that is way more interesting to be able to like try to pin it down or to be trying to like define it is completely futile because we are so adaptable and so changeable all the time. And I think that's like what's so exciting about Filipinx identity, if we want to use that, right? Like, I know that's like a huge question right now is like, why are we using it or not? And I'm like, I don't even fucking care. Like, I continue to say Filipino and Filipino American just because like that's the general thing. And like beyond that, like there's so many categories, but honestly, it's just like we get stuck in that the jargon of the naming and we forget to like you guys are doing, like just go into the richness of everyone's experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think by human nature, we like to know things and we like to label things. And that's why we get so obsessed with like, what are you? Like, where are you from? You know, like, no, really, where are you really from? You know? And I think what we're doing, or I'd like to believe on the show, is saying like, first of all, we don't owe it to you, you know, to like, to be your teacher and tell you where we're from and who we are. And secondly, I think going back to the whole presence, it's like, you know, sure, that's my heritage, but like, what about who I am today? Like, isn't that important? And even if I don't have all the answers, like I'm still more than enough. Like I'm still more than qualified to be in this space right now, you know, to have this conversation with you. So yeah, I just love this thorough discussion we're having with identity. Cause you know, obviously it's not just a Filipino American woman issue or Filipinx issue. It's a human issue.
Yes.
I think to really just
that's
come
a
down
good
to
point.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though we are speaking, you know, our ideal audience are Filipino American women, I think what I'd like to believe in these conversations is realizing we all are beautifully unique, beautifully designed, and it's just time to own it. Like it's okay to own like your uniqueness and your ever evolving identity and personality.
Yeah, I do just want to add one last thing before we move on, and that is to the listener. If you guys haven't already seen the caste system meme or whatever you want to call it, visual on Instagram, or that's been going around on social media, I would highly recommend that you go and find it and check that out because it can be really informative for a lot of people who don't understand the history of diversity of Filipino people. not just recently or here in the diaspora, but historically. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll have to forward that to me. One of you can.
I will. I think I posted it on our story like a week ago, but I will send it to you. Maybe we can put a link to it or something.
Yeah,
on our website.
On our website, or
in our pretty new website.
Yes. Yeah. Just humor Jen and visit the website TFAWproject.com. Jen worked really hard on that. I'm talking in third person. She worked really hard on that. So
I'll say it. Jen worked very hard on that.
Congratulations. Building a website is hard.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And fortunately, we had help through our sponsor, Captivate, because they make it really easy to put the website together and stuff. So I just have to give a shout out to them. I'm not a web designer or anything. I'm not that. So I usually, yeah. All right. Anyway, let's go ahead and fast forward to today, Rebecca, since we're talking so much about presence and who you are today. For people that are getting to know you for the first time, and I know with current events, there's a new normal that has been established for many of us, but why don't you share a snapshot of your life and particularly what keeps you busy or excited about life nowadays?
Oh man, today is a busy day actually. So I recently graduated from my MFA program. So I am a 2020 Corona grad.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Wow. Thanks you guys. Yeah, it feels good. I feel pretty stoked on, moving out of institutional life, which I think is important, moving on. But I'm currently in the process of moving out of my studio. So that's been really interesting. So for 3 years, I've settled into this room in the art building at the University of Hawaii campus here in Honolulu. And it's okay, there's so many things here culturally, but I'm a hoarder. Okay. I'm just going to say it.
Me too.
I collect shit. I'm a collector. I
have the hardest time throwing things away and letting go of things.
I can't let go.
I have no use for.
Little things are important to me. Objects, material, possessions.
Everything has a memory or something attached to it. I get it.
Okay. Everyone can relate. You know why? Because my grandma did the same damn thing. And you know why? It comes from a scarcity mentality and mindset. And especially here on island, there's only certain materials that we can get. I personally turn that into I see it as a positive because, I always have something that I need. I'm never really I don't buy shit on Amazon for my art. You know what I'm saying? I actually don't buy, I've put myself on an Amazon boycott even just this year because I was fuck that. First of all, that company's evil, they're doing so much crazy shit. They're fucking up so many people's lives just by forcing them to continue to deliver the goods that other people need to keep buying. So, so when I looked at my studio and I was oh my God, I'm going to have to move out of here. I literally even other people in the building were you really moved in, didn't you? And I think that also comes from this place of making a home for yourself. You know, I've moved around a lot. I've chosen to move, but I've also I'm a diasporic person. My family lost their house from gentrification in Chicago.
Wow.
There's a consistent moving. My dad's basically they're refugees from Germany from the war. We have a history of movement, right? So when I came to this space, I knew that I would be able to be there for 3 years. And so my partner built some shelving in there for me. He built a loft for me. I didn't really sleep there that much, but I made a little kitchen. I would have people over all the time. It was a crash hangout spot within the art building. And I used it as a community organizing space where people would always have meetings and people would be there all the time. And it was an important place, but it also was a storage unit, for all the random stuff that I would find if I found something on the street or, there was a free store at school. So I would just take all the materials. And so then plus my work and my experiments with materials. So in going through that space now, and kind of going back through these past 3 years of exploration, which has really been about identity and Filipino-ness, it's been such a wow, just such a weird flashback, mini flashback, but also very therapeutic to throw it all away. And actually not even throw it away, but give it away. So I've just been having a lot of different people stop by my studio and pick stuff up. My friend came by with their kids, you know, just people. I'm like posting it on Instagram, like, you want this, you want this, you want this, just like, come get it. And, you know, most of it, like, it's not like high valued items. I had a couple things that were like maybe worth $50 or whatever. So trying to like fund myself too. I mean, I think that's another big thing right now is like, as an artist, a working artist, like, okay, what's my work going to be now that it's like in pandemic time, right? Like, I'm not going to just be teaching classes right now. You know, everything's going online. My plans for like post-graduation, just kind of work, are very limited right now. But I also think that, you know, I subscribe to like abundance theory, and that like, if I have abundance and I give it out to the world, that's going to come back to me too. So I've been really occupying myself with like, one, just going through my stuff. I've been doing a bunch of fundraisers too. Like we did the Bakers Against Racism fundraiser that went off like a couple weeks ago. A couple people and I organized to raise some money for an organization here in Hawaii that's called the PodFest Project, that a friend of ours, Akemi, she's actually also my neighbor, runs here in Hawaii, in sort of generating spaces and educational conversations about Blackness in Hawaii and the Pacific. So I think from all of the Black Lives Matter stuff, like as soon as that stuff really started taking off and the death of George Floyd sort of like lit the match. When Black Lives Matter stuff started happening, we in the Filipino community here got together a bunch of people and we're like, okay, how are we going to respond to this? What are we going to do as Filipinos? And from most of the Black community here, who are also very exhausted from dealing with everything and having everyone check in and all that stuff. But we also, you know, we were kind of waiting for like, you know, guidance or I guess leadership from the Black community. And I think the Black community was also requesting that. But we, through Akemi and through some other organizers, you know, decided that it is the time for Filipinos to step up into that position of leadership and to make and create intentional spaces for these conversations to happen around anti-Blackness. So actually tomorrow we are having the first of a series of 4 conversations that I'm actually going to be doing. Like, it's called, I will be holding a creative contemplation space at the end of every conversation. So each conversation has a theme. I think tomorrow's is going to be Hawaii Filipinx Call to Action, Black Lives Matter. And then each one following up with that, there's one about indigeneity in Blackness. There's one about racial politics in occupied Hawaii. And there's another one that's about a people's budget in terms of thinking about, you know, what the Filipino and the Filipinx community needs here in Hawaii. So it is really specific to place. I think Hawaii really has a unique sort of Filipino community here that also branches into the Bay Area, branches into New York, it branches into Seattle and the Philippines and Guam and the Pacific in general. So we really took it upon ourselves as people who are already thinking about anti-racist work. And I personally think that that's been a part of my work from the beginning, but this is just a moment in time where it's like, okay, now it's a marker of like, we got to step it up. Like, it's not only just about us and our identity, right? And how does our identity intertwine with other people of color, Black people, you know, Black identified indigenous peoples, especially thinking about the Philippines and what's going on there and in Mindanao and in the Cordillera and all the indigenous struggles, land struggles. So I think for me, it's just been a really intense couple of months. I mean, I know a lot of people like went straight into lockdown and were like, all right, it's all good. I was like, okay, I'm graduating. Now I'm trying to organize my community online, you know, like a lot of people are. I've been making masks because that's another big thing that, you know, the government and the state here was not providing masks to the prison community, the incarcerated community. So we stepped up, a group of loosely affiliated, we call ourselves the Seamsters Union. We just got together and, you know, figured out the mask making, and we've been just busting out masks. I've kind of been slow on that recently because I've been doing so many other things. But yeah, so it's been really all about like finding some money sources and flowing those in the right directions. It's been about, you know, cleaning out my space and trying to figure out how to hold my own department, the art department at the university, accountable for also upholding a lot of the systemic racism and a lot of the just uncomfortable space that I've had to hold in that I'm not Black, like I'm never going to claim Blackness, but I'm like probably one of the browner people in that department. And so like to receive the kind of microaggressions that I shared with you guys and like other ones, like I'm working on document that's holding that department accountable for those actions. So I've been writing a lot of letters. I've been, I think even though we're at home, there's still a lot that we can do. I've been calling, all the ICE stuff that's happening on the border, I've been really involved in just like calling in and my reps for that. And then, oh my God, you guys think I'm totally nuts because I'm just like in so many different spaces, but this is also like the responsibility that we have as multifaceted Filipinos, right? It's like, I'm not just going to only be involved in terror bill organizing because that also applies to Palestine, which is where my father was born, So like, how do I then manage? I think it's been, for mental health, for everybody, it's just been an onslaught of information and just trying to manage, and it's like damage control, like, oh my God, one more thing happening, like, but I feel really excited that people have been stepping up in the ways that they have. And I personally feel like I'm pushing myself to do out of the boundaries of what I would normally be doing while I'm in school. Now I have a little bit more time and space to do more. And yeah, it's definitely like a challenge and definitely an everyday sort of like, management of like, okay, my schedule is going to be this, I'm going to do this. And then today my girlfriend, who's also Filipina, who you all should totally interview, her name's Layla Kilolu. She's a Filipina Vietnamese from LA. She goes to UH. She's doing urban planning, doing her PhD in urban planning. So she's an amazing sustainability person.
Nice.
But she's also a musician. And so we played music together. And so I shot some photos of her last week. And today is my turn to be the photo shoot person. So I'm supposed to, after I get off this call, I'm going to put together some outfits so we can like go take some photos together. But you know what I'm saying? So it's a multiplicitous existence of managing a lot of different projects. And I enjoy my life being that way. And it's also like, just trying to pay your rent. So if people are even
there's always that.
if people are even paying rent right now. Right. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I think I love what I do. I love being an artist. I love being able to organize community and hold space for people to have these conversations. And I think I need to mention this organization that I helped co-found, which is called Laing Hawaii, which is basically a language school. So we offer free language classes in Ilocano and Visayan, and we're trying to expand to some of the more other immigrant languages of Hawaii, like Chuukese, Marshallese, the peoples from Micronesia and the Marshall Islands, even Palau and stuff like that. That's been a lot of my organizing too. And we did a bunch of workshops on mental health, just because, when everything started shutting down, there was a lot of support, I think, for people filing unemployment. There was support for people getting their paperwork done and support for people on like this really sort of generic state and federal level. But the mental health aspect just completely, the bottom dropped out. Like if you even had a therapist, that turned into a thing. But most people, and you guys know this more than most, is like mental health, the stigma for all that stuff is just so heavy that like we saw a lot of our community. I heard a lot of people in my classes being like, well, I'm just drinking all day, or like, I'm just, self-medicating or whatever, or like you're locked at home with your family. Like, who the hell is your family?
Yeah.
Are they abusing you? Are they taking advantage of you? Like, we don't know. So for a lot of people, school and work was like a safe space outside of the home.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when that all started happening, we were like, all right, we really need to get some mental health workshops going here. So we organized a couple of those, and those were really successful. And we're still going to be organizing our Ilocano classes to go completely online, which has been awesome because so many people have been writing us from all over, just being like, yo, I really want to study Ilocano. How can I do this? So I think there's, pluses and minuses on both sides, but I do think the online learning has been a really big push. It's pushed us as an organization to try to provide that as also a space of decolonization, decolonial learning, of rebuilding your identity, not only seeing it as based in these certain particular things, but helping people expand a little bit what that quote unquote like Filipino-ness looks like. Because I think especially here in Hawaii, it looks a certain way, and it's based on people's experiences here that also are rooted in plantation era culture. And so growing up within that sort of, you know, the lineage of the plantation is also really heavy. And so trying to get people to deconstruct that a little bit is important. And that's new to me. That's research that I've been newly doing. So I really, you know, work with the community here and my friends, and even I have family here too that is in the military, and how do we start thinking about how our complicity with the military is also oppressive to Native Hawaiians, how it's oppressive to Black peoples. Yeah, so I can ramble on and on like this forever, but those are kind of some of the things I've been working on lately.
Just some.
Just a few. I mean,
just a few.
Yeah.
just you know,
a sample.
Just saving the world. No big deal. Just you know.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I just want to take a moment to honor all of the work that you've been doing, especially you know, in the pandemic and through trying to support the Black community after George Floyd and all of the other police brutality that's been going on. I think it's super important in our community right now for leaders such as yourself to be, you know, taking on that work and showing us, because I feel like when everything first kind of popped off, the response that I was seeing was kind of like, like, what do we say? What do we do? You know
Frozen.
what I mean? Everyone was kind of like frozen for a minute, and everyone was like, how does this concern me? You know what I mean? And that's a question that people really need to sit on and reflect on, because even if you don't think that it involves you, it absolutely does, whether it's talking about colorism within the Filipinx community or how our struggles are intertwined. I was reading something from Angela Davis, and I forget what it is she said, but it was basically like, you can't understand anti-Blackness without also understanding anti-Muslim, you know?
Absolutely.
And with, you know, for example, what's happening right now in the Philippines with the anti-terror bill is directly connected to what Trump is trying to do with us today, you know, and the stuff that's going on with ICE, like everything. Once you just sit down to learn about one of those movements, it's like, oh, you can make so many different connections in so many different places. And that's, you know, you're tied to it. That's why you should care, because in one way or another, it does or it will affect you. So yeah, I appreciate you highlighting that.
It is so interconnected, and like you said, like we're all complicit, you know, and I feel like a lot of times there's like that guilt factor, or everyone feels paralyzed, or like you just don't know how to respond or react because you're like, it's just too much. And I think that is intentional, you know, they intentionally bombard us with all of this kind of stuff to keep people paralyzed and fearful and feel like and disempowered. And so to me, I think my main goal has been throughout this whole situation to be like, okay, what can I actually do? What are the skills that I have now that I can do? Like, I know how to bake and I know how to sew. That's some basic ass shit that my grandma taught me, you know, but like
but it can be extremely usul in this time.
It's extremely useful and extremely powerful if you utilize it in the right way. So it is all about, you know, like Seme, our like dance theme through that whole like booty class was that Level Up song. And we were like, This is all about leveling up, like all of our skills, all of our, you know, transcending the limitations that are put upon us right now and for this particular moment, and just seeing how you can do it better, how you can do it in a different way. I mean, it's all about creativity. And I think a lot of artists have been showing, you know, the communities when like the state gets paralyzed, when like certain shit stops happening, you know, like how are the ways that you can kind of flow through that?
Yeah. Also, I just wanted to say about the language school, the Laing school. By the way, Laing is one of my favorite dishes. But I think it's really great that you're forming a language school that kind of intertwines talking about identity and decolonization and things like that. Like, I can't imagine what the kids that are going through your programs are going to be like what their language and vocabulary is going to look like once they're done. that sounds like a really amazing opportunity. Like, I would love to attend that school.
You can. Well, and it's mostly like young adults and adults. Like our age range is mainly like 18 to 35.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys are all totally welcome to join us, and we're going to try to set it up as kind of more workshop based. So like you could sign up for like 6 workshops. I mean, ideally you want to do the whole set. There's going to be like 12 or something like that for this fall. But we do want them to be a little bit more accessible to people, where people can just do a couple, because it is hard. I mean, we all went through this program. It was something that was started actually by the Consul General here in Hawaii, like a couple years, like maybe almost 7 years ago, 2013, I think. And it was in partnership with our Ilocano professor from UH and Manong Agkoili. He's actually in the Philippines right now. So we're kind of like trying to figure out how to move it online. So a couple years ago when we went on an immersion to the Philippines, they were like, okay, we don't really know if we're going to be able to keep doing this program. There's not enough support for it. We don't have space, et cetera, or money. So the group that I went with to the Philippines, our class decided, you know what, we're going to keep this going. And we just decided to, we kind of like revamped a little, and we started inviting some more guest speakers and just tried to instill some of the kind of more political thinking and decolonial thinking that was really important to us through our journey. And that's kind of grown into like something more than just like the language, but the language is the basis for all of that conversation.
Yeah. No, I would love to learn the language through, the context of talking about my identity and things like that. So very, very cool.
Yes.
Yeah. Rebecca, wow, you are doing such incredible work right now. It almost sounds like the pandemic is not affecting you because of how busy you are. Seriously. I'm just like, does she know there's a pandemic going on?
I know, right? For real though. Like, just sit down. I know. Sometimes I'm like, woman, just rest, and resting, when it first popped off, because my whole thesis exhibition, and I'll just mention this briefly, was a gathering space. So like took a space in the gallery. I made it into like a living room setting. Basically, I made all these pillows, everyone could hang out. There were all these like woven curtains. It was like kind of like walking into like sort of memory of your grandmother's space, like what it would have been like 100 years ago, but also like now. So anyways, I tried to make that space, and then it was only open for a week, and then everything was shut down. Man. And I spent, months and months of planning to make that happen. I was like, I had all these grants, all that kind of stuff. So it was like, like totally truncated the whole situation. And then after, once everyone was like, okay, got to stay home, I was like, oh shit, like I'm not going to do shit. I was kind of relieved. I was like, oh, perfect. I can just relax. Like, I had 3 more weeks of programming to get through.
And then the world is like, psych.
It was a huge psych moment. And then I really didn't do anything. I mean, I was just like sat, I just chilled, and I was like, wow, okay, guess this is where we're at. And I was really inspired by the NAP ministry. I don't know if you guys heard of them. Another Filipino, Kim Kompak, is another amazing Filipina scholar here at UH who you all also should interview. But she mentioned in a phone call, one of the early pandemic phone calls, she was like, you guys should check out the NAP ministry. And it's a Black woman, can't remember her name, Patricia, I believe, who... her work is, she's an artist, and it's a collective, I think, but all their work is about Black women resting and taking time to relax. And they build these beautiful installations of like billowing curtains, and then they just have women just like sleeping there or just resting and hanging out. And that is truly what my exhibition was trying to do too. It was trying to be a space of rest and recuperation and regeneration. And so when everything shut down, I was like, okay, I do need to rest. This is a moment. It is a call for everyone to just chill. But at the same time, it's like when you're like a workaholic like me, like what does resting really look like? So I've been trying to go to the water. I've been in the ocean a lot, like recently, just to like keep that balance a little bit. But it is, like when you're on the grind all the time, it's just not, it doesn't work like that. Like we have to be able to, which is specifically why when we were planning this series of talks about anti-Blackness, with all the different people coming together from different orgs, we were like, okay, how are we going to give this longevity? Like we can't just like do it all right now. Like you have to be able to stagger it. So we were like, okay, people were like, all right, we're going to take these first couple, we'll organize these. We're going to take a couple more in the fall, like just kind of like space it out, and really being able to lean on other people is really important too. Because yeah, it's not like, I mean, I can't do it all myself, even though most of us think that we can have that kind of impact. Like it's just so easy to just collapse and burn out. Like it's exhausting. So yeah, I appreciate your guys' just recognition of that work and that labor. And it's not paid. I mean, none of us are like doing this for money. We're just doing it because we need to do it. And like you guys too, it's like, you know that the stories need to be told.
Yeah. And, I appreciate you saying that, Rebecca. I wanted to add upon what you were saying, that we have to stagger it out because this should be sustainable as well. Like once we started to create more BLM awareness, a lot of people are saying like, okay, like we got your attention, but it's not just like another like headline, like we have to make this sustainable. And so I think it's really, really important to spread that out because we do want this to last. We don't just want this to be a trendy thing. We don't want this to be another hashtag on Twitter that just disappears, the next day. Like we are really trying to change a lot of things right now, and we can't do it overnight. We can't do it alone. And yeah, it's going to take time. It's going to take community, and it's going to take consistency in a way that respects our own mental, physical, emotional health, because, we all know that is very important as well.
I can only imagine what kind of work that you'd be doing, post-corona, when we can go outside and get back to our normal, like gathering spaces and everything, because you're doing so much, in quarantine. I can only imagine the potential that you have to be impactful.
Oh my God. Watch out.
More normal circumstances. What a force.
I know. Like a bat out of hell.
I love it. We need that. We need that.
Another thing I wanted to add too is just how much you embrace how multifaceted you are. Because, I have always considered myself very eclectic, and even I juggle a million projects at once. And I used to feel ashamed about that. I used to think that I had to be just good at one thing or be known for one thing. And no matter how much I tried, I have found that if I stick with one thing, it kills me. Like, I'm just like, I can't do this. Like, I remember, this reminds me of when I was in high school, I picked up a lot of extracurricular activities. Like I did sports, I did organizations. And then first year in college, I was like, I'm just going to be a student. Like, my first year, like I took on like the full amount of units you could take as a college student at San Diego State University. That's like, I think I took like 18 units, and that's like considered like over full time, to be a student.
Yeah, I think 12 is like full time, isn't it?
Wow. Yeah, so I did 18.
Is aggressive.
I was like, I'm going to do 18 because I'm not going to have any extracurricular. I'm going to be like the good student my mom always wanted me to be. Well, let me tell you, that first year, I almost ended up on academic probation. Like, no joke. Like, I was like a 2.01 GPA, and I had to climb my way up. Like, and I remember when I finally picked my major, you needed at least a 3.0 to get into it. And you had to like pass this like grammar test and get at least like 80 out of 100 out of that. And it's crazy because I remember the semester when I got my best grades, it was because I was busy. I was so busy. Yeah. I was in all these extracurriculars. I was in homecoming court. Like I just did like so many things. Wow. And I was recovering from a breakup.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And that was my best semester yet. And I was like, you know what? Like then on, I realized, yes, it glow up. And so, well, the thing is we ended up getting back together, but that's a whole other thing. And then we broke up a couple years later. But anyway,
that's okay. We've all been there.
But you use that energy to launch yourself.
Yes, exactly. That's the point.
Bingo.
Yeah, the point is, and then also just like embracing the fact that I am eclectic, I'm multifaceted, I'm multi-passionate. And I had struggled with that for many years, but I've just come to a place now, especially because of all the people we've had the fortune of interviewing on the show, to be like, you know what, like I am who I am, and it's cool. It is what it is. So I appreciate you like just being so thorough with everything that you're doing today. No big deal. Because it just validates, I think, our listeners and even myself, to be like, yeah, I do a lot. So I do a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of people to serve. Like, I got to do it. Like, it's a responsibility. So thank you for really, sharing that and what you're doing nowadays. It's a lot.
I know. And it is like, my mom is always like, just say no. just say no.
You're like, no.
And I'm like, but I mean, it is, and there is something. I did see one of my other manangs, one of my like older mentors here in Hawaii the other day. And I was like, how are you, manang? And she's like, I just feel like I'm doing so much and I'm just at like 80% capacity with like everything that I'm like, everything I'm at 80% and I just could be doing better. And I'm like, yes, I know exactly how you feel, because like you're trying to reserve some kind of energy for yourself and your life and your home and whatever. But like, if you are going to go 100%, like that has to be like, the energy does have to be focused in, you know? And I feel like even though my work is like social practice, right? Like I think of myself as a person who works in these ways as an artist. Like my life is not totally separate from my art. I'm not like just here making these things and selling them, and that's like my art. And then I'm over here doing this community stuff. Like I do feel like it is intertwined so much so that it is difficult to like discern what's what. And I think that's, you know, much like I feel like the quote unquote art world would want you to be like more separate so you can like tell like, what is the art, right? Like what is the art? Is it like just me on the phone all day, like trying to organize something? Like, is that art? I don't know. But that kind of like the attempt to channel your energy into something and to create it and to make something happen and to organize something and to get it to go. And then whatever happens within the space that you did organize, like that to me is just more interesting than just not doing anything, or like, you know, like everyone's like Netflix and chill. And I'm like, girl, who got time for that?
Time for that, yeah.
Like,
not in Rebecca's world.
But you do have to like just do the shit that you like to do. And then it's not a question of whether or not you're going to want to do it. You just like, you make the choice to invest yourself and your energy and your time and your love into something that's, you know, is going to feed back to you. You know, and like you're saying, Jen, with like, you know, you go through this breakup or you go through whatever you're going through in your life, and it's just like, it seems really devastating or like it's going to knock you out. But those are the kind of moments. And like, I feel like I also just want to mention our ancestors here, because all of our ancestors brought us together into this space. Like that was a call to bring us together to talk in this way, you know?
Yes.
And I always tried to give thanks to them for leading me here. And I would have never spoken that way a couple of years ago. I've never been like, oh, my ancestors, but I really think like that's why I do what I do. Is like, I was texting a girlfriend last night. She's like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know. I'm super overwhelmed, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, girl, your freaking ancestors, we got this shit. Like, look at what the shit they had to go through. Like literally. And I'm going to bring it back. Well, maybe Jen is going to mention this later, but I'm going to bring it back to, I think, something I mentioned in the quote that I gave you guys, which is like, my grandmother always told me, like, don't settle, you know, like just don't settle. Just always try your best. Always do as much as you can. Always do things for yourself. Like, don't just only do it. You only sacrifice. I think that's something really unique for a Filipino person, you know, coming out of the 20th century, right? Like she was coming to America in like the 1950s, and like she was all about like, she was like, I made this choice because I wanted to come here for my own adventure and for my own sake. Obviously, she went also to America to help her family and send money back and all those things too. But she was very much like an independent. She was very much about being an independent woman. And I think that really influenced my way of just like being in the world too.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't have to do the transition. So thank you. One thing, no, don't apologize. That was perfect. I love it when people do it for me, because it's like, oh, sweet. Okay. Save me some time. But, you know, one thing she also mentioned that you included in your notes here is that she encouraged you to not get married, which I think is very unique. You know, I think of my whole life, my whole family is always expecting me to, I mean, obviously I'm married, but
every time you see them, when are you getting married?
Yeah. And then if it's not marriage, it's like, it's the next thing after that. When you're going to have kids, when, you know, I want grandkids, you know? And so I'm curious, what do I want to ask about that question? I just think it's so fascinating, you know, that your grandma had encouraged that. I just think it's so fascinating, because I haven't heard that, you know, I think it's the first time I'm hearing a grandma, you know, say, don't get married. It's cool. Like, do you.
Inspiring. Yeah, it's inspiring to hear that because, like Jen said, most of us have not, or we've heard the opposite basically our whole lives. And it sounds like just from the little bit that you've shared with us so far about your grandma, that she just had so much like respect for herself and for her own like dreams and desires. And I love that she really like ingrained that in you too, because a lot of us just get lost in that like colonial mentality, like stay on the path, do what you're supposed to do, walang hiya, you know, like don't talk back, don't disappoint me, don't try to sway off stream, just keep your head down and keep walking, you know? And so I love that you have like just like the complete opposite of that. And I think that our community really needs to hear that like again and again and again. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You don't have to fulfill the Maria Clara archetype. It's okay.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's funny. Like I remember when my grandmother told me, so just general life story background for her. She grew up on a farm in Pangasinan. Her family was landowners. Her grandfather was in the church, the Methodist church. So they had land and they had space. So they had money, right? But they weren't rich. They just had land, but land is money, right? So they had vegetable farm. They paid for her to go to school in Manila with vegetables. They basically would like send carts of vegetables to pay for her tuition to go to school. That was like part of the exchange, right?
Wow.
And which is really cool.
Yeah, it's dope that you know these details. Like,
yeah, you know,
cool.
I just have collected them from what she told me, from what my mom told me, from, you know, aunties told me, but she wanted to be a lawyer and her family wouldn't let her be a lawyer. She was born in 1920. So she was going to school in Manila, like in the like early, you know, war times. Like this was like, I think she ended up going back because of the war. You know, there's so much that I could say about her life and her journey, but she went to nursing school. She was one of like these early boats of nurses that came over. She came, I think, in 52, something like that. So like after the war, but she was part of this. Like if you guys read Dr. Sinisa Choi's, then the book about nursing, Empire of Care, she talks about Chicago as being like the center point for the recruitment of nurses in that particular time frame. And so my grandmother was definitely part of that. It was like the schools that were built in the Philippines were specifically to recruit nurses to get them jobs in the States, and Chicago and New Jersey was another place. So she went to New Jersey first and then came to Chicago and met my grandfather there. She was already like 32 or something. That's like my age when she met my grandfather. And I always wonder, I'm like, wow, did she have boyfriends? Like, did she have like, who was she gay? I don't know. She was like with women all the time. All her pictures are of her with like other nurses. You just don't, I have no idea. Right. Yeah. But she said that her peers were like, well, don't you want to have kids and have a family? And she's already 32. She's like, I guess. And so she kind of was like almost peer pressured into getting married. And so she met her husband, which is my grandfather, who was a lot older. He was like in his 50s. And, you know, I don't know, maybe they got married for papers. Maybe they got married for love. Who knows? They clearly have an exchange. We have like cute little letters and like photographs of their exchange and their like courting days. It's very
sweet. You have letters.
Yeah. It's just like cute, like little notes on the backs of photos and stuff like that.
That's so invaluable. I love that.
It's amazing. Yeah. And it's beautiful. And like, I don't want to invalidate their love and their relationship. Like they clearly had something going on. They had two kids, my mom and her twin sister. And so it's like thinking about, but when she told me like, don't get married, just travel. I was like, oh my God, like, how could you say that? Because like you have family and you have kids, but she was an adventurous person. I mean, she was the first, anyone who leaves their house, like I give so much props to all the Filipinos, whatever, the 6,000 who leave every single day, who are mostly women, who go to Dubai, who go to Tokyo, who go to whatever, to leave their house and to go, like they have this sort of like spirit of like wanting to do that. Like, even though it's a necessity, maybe some people don't want to leave, there's still something in you that like has, you know, you made that decision, right? So I think my grandmother always really was like, yeah, like she was all about that. She was all about looking good. She was like all about fashion. Like we would just try on dresses, and my mom's all about fashion. Like she was definitely all about like presenting yourself in this particular way and being independently, I guess, being economically independent. And that was something that was really important to her too, of just like knowing your money, knowing how to count it, knowing what to do with it, knowing how to invest it, knowing how to buy houses. Like some of my aunties who she helped bring over the whole family, right? Like everyone who's in my family who's here in the States now, like my grandma, they passed through one of my grandmother's houses, and she was really, strategic in their pathways to get to, the American dream or whatever. So I think I do see her as a leader in that kind of sense. But then, there's just their characters, like them, seeing them as our ancestors in our lives, like what they offer to us and what they continue to offer to us. It's like, it is this sort of guidance of like how to really, truly just be yourself. She was very straightforward. And I remember one of my cousins told me that he went to stay with her one summer or something, and they went to the grocery store, and she had all these like bags of groceries, and she was like getting it all together outside. He's like, "Oh, I'll help you carry it, Auntie." And she's like, "No, I can do it myself." She just grabbed all the bags and just kept walking, and he was like, "Okay," like he's like probably in his like early 20s or something. So that kind of thing. She just was that kind of person. And I think when you do make those choices to go somewhere that you're going to depend on your community wherever you are, but if you get there and you don't necessarily have that, you have to build that for yourself too.
You have to create it.
Yeah, I think that was very much a part of her story, was like building it up.
She sounds like she was just so like ahead of her time, being born in 1920 and having such a mindset like that and being so adventurous and independent. I think that, again, from just the few minutes or hours, however long we've been on this call, talking to you, I can definitely see that like same spirit manifested in you. So I think that that's let's pay some homage to Grandma.
Love you, Grandma Marcella.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what a discussion, right? I mean, I don't even know how to end this.
Don't get married.
No, don't get married. Don't fucking do it. Just don't.
That'll be the title of our episode. Don't get married.
Exactly.
Wait, so Rebecca, you are not married?
I'm not
okay.
married. No.
Okay. And you have no desire to get married still?
I mean, if I really go into like the feminist thinking of like, I guess we'll say Western feminist thinking of like what marriage is, it's an economic contract, it's a benefit to people's economy. And if that works for you, then that's awesome. And I don't doubt that people are reclaiming marriage for themselves in whatever way that they want to.
Right.
Personally, don't feel like that kind of commitment is necessary for me, but who knows, maybe it'll happen. I don't know, that maybe that is a possibility still, but I do have when I was working in San Diego, actually, I had a group of girls I ran a project with called Collective Voices, and the women were mostly teenagers who were born in San Diego, but their parents were from East Africa. So mostly Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia. And one of the moms asked me, I had a partner at the time, my boyfriend, and she was like, "Oh, where's your boyfriend tonight?" And I was like, "Oh, he's not here. He's working." And she was like, "Are you guys married?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Well, why not?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just feel like I don't need to be married. I can do things by myself." And she was like, and they're very traditional Muslim, coming from a very traditional background. And she was like, "Well, if you get married, then he can just help you do all of the things that you want to do." And I was like, "Oh, that's actually a really good point." And my grandmother, just thinking about this, my grandmother also did say one thing that I will always remember. She was like, if you get married, because she said don't get married, right? But then she goes, if you get married, make sure to marry a poor man so you can get rich together.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
I wish I could have met your grandma.
Like, what all these tips? That popped in
what
my
advice?
head too.
Yeah.
She should have like a book on her, like her own lessons on
advice
and everything.
Advices. So don't do it, but if you do get married, at least marry a poor guy so you can get rich together.
I love
there
that.
You go.
So, on that note,
close it up.
Yeah, Rebecca, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. This is why I love just kind of going into these conversations, just like like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed because like I love uncovering, these types of stories. So thank you for just being extremely present with us today and so candid and open with your story and everything that you're going through. And we're really excited for you now that you're graduated. I'm really excited to see like more of the work that you're going to do. No big deal. And for people that do want to reach out to you and connect with you and collaborate with you or be, help you, how can they do that? How can they find you online?
I think the best thing is Instagram right now, even though I feel like everyone's overwhelmed in that space. But honestly, like people hit me up all the time and I love it. I love connecting with people there. I think it's been a really generative space for all of us, especially in the Filipino community to connect with people. So please, hit me up. I'm at big things.
Love it.
Every time I say it, I just have to laugh because it's hilarious. But
so fitting,
somehow it works. So go just hit me up there. I think that's probably the best spot. You can also email me. I have a website. It's Rebecca with 3 R's. So RRREBECCA.com. And you can see some of my more artwork stuff over there. But yeah, I'm really more than happy to connect with anyone. I'm so grateful to you guys for this platform and really, truly appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Like, to me, archives are really important and the history, right? Like these documents that we have from the past. And so this whole collection of interviews that you guys have is such an incredible bounty that you're offering. Yeah, it's an offering forward because this is something that like none of us had growing up. It's something that none of us had, our parents, our grandparents didn't have this kind of validation for our own experiences. And so it was like when I got this message, I was like, yes, of course. I'm so happy to talk to them because I can blab on forever. But you guys are truly, truly making a space for these conversations to even happen and then to be recorded and contained and like shared out. Like that's the most important part. And like someone's going to come back to this and it doesn't even have to be 50 years. It can be in like 2 years to just do an analysis of like how people's experiences look and exist and feel. So thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, that means so much to us. Thank you. And, I feel like we had this conversation with Janina about the intent of our show. And I don't like to say that we are necessarily trying to do any kind of movement or anything. I mean, if there's any movement, it's documentation. But I like to create this safe space for, our fellow Pinays to document their stories because you just don't know who that's going to help. So I just want to thank you for collaborating and contributing to this project overall. And I'm just really excited to see, I'm really excited for you for when our listeners reach out and want to connect and chat with you more.
Thank you for joining us today, Rebecca. It was such a fun time hanging out with you virtually here.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. And with that said, obviously, everyone, I always say this, and please just humor me if that's all you're going to do. But if you want to get the show notes, if you want to get that details on how to contact Rebecca, check out our website at TFAWproject.com. That's TFAWproject.com. Just humor me. Just do it. Or not. I don't want to pressure you. But,
it's brand new.
Yeah. I'm just saying. But yeah, with that said, thank you all so much for listening. We hope that this conversation resonated with you. Please reach out to us, engage with us. And until then, we look forward to speaking with you in the next episode. Tune in next time.
Ta-ta.
Bye.